Voices of the Bench community, greetings. I am Dr. Shashikant Singhal, Director of Education and Professional Services with Ivoclar Academy. I hope everyone is doing just amazing. I'm sure you are excited to be at LMT Day at Chicago. I would like to take this opportunity to personally invite you to Ivoclar LMT Lab Day lectures. We have a stellar lineup of guest speakers, some of the industry's biggest voices, 18 total programs over 3 full days. I will be sharing information on cementation protocols during my course, what your doctors need to know about cementation. Our goal is to provide you with great information in a fun and enjoyable setting. Lots of exciting stuff, so please come and join us. You can log on to labday.com/Ivoclar, that is labday.com/Ivoclar, to see our lineup of lectures and to register for our programs. Don't miss this opportunity. Come and see us. Thank you so much.
Welcome to Voices from the Bench, a dental laboratory podcast. Send us an email at info@voicesfromthebench.com and follow us on Facebook and Instagram. Greetings and welcome to episode 351 of Voices from the Bench. My name is Albert.
And my name's Barbara.
Who just told me you haven't even had coffee yet. This will be fun.
Yeah, that's never good. 10:10 on a Saturday. It took us 20 minutes to get connected, and I've had no coffee. So let's roll.
I've had enough for the both of us plus some, so...
I didn't even know you liked coffee.
Are you serious?
After 400 episodes.
I drink coffee 24 hours a day.
Really?
I do.
That's amazing.
And black, nothing in it, is my favorite, so... That says a lot about a person is what they tell me.
Let's go.
All right, it's official. We talk about it probably way too much, but it just goes to show you how excited we are that the 2025 Lab Day Chicago is up. You are able to register.
Nice. 2 months.
I've seen a lot of people online talk about they're excited to go. They've booked. They've got their room. They're picking out their courses. And the who's who of amazing talent that's going to be speaking is awesome.
Of course.
So let's not also forget to mention that this is LMT's 40th year holding this event. Can you believe that? 40 years
I thought
they've
that
been
was
doing
last
LMT?
year. Oh my God, that's crazy. I thought it was last year. Are you sure it's not 41?
Maybe they're just riding the anniversary for a couple years, you know?
All right.
When was the first year you went? Have you gone 40 times?
No, I'm not that old.
Oh, jeez. You need some
no coffee.
Yeah.
No funny.
There is so much to do over these 3 days. I mean, all the vendors, the speakers, and of course, seeing friends. But there's one thing that you cannot miss. That is, of course, coming to see us in the Ivoclar Grand Ballroom, where we will be set up again, recording everyone and anyone willing to sit down.
Or I'll just grab you.
Yeah, and if you don't want to record, that's okay. Don't avoid us. Still stop by and say hi. We'd love to meet you. We are less than 65 days away from this show.
Damn.
So, of course, lmtmag.com to register. So this week, I had a chance to talk to a dentist that also owns a dental lab. Now, Barb, I think you were doing like an NBC
or
Cal Lab thing. I can't remember, but you were surely missed, of course.
Thank you.
But Dr. Danny Domingue was in dental school when Katrina hit, forcing him to finish school in a different area.
Wow.
Now, he wanted to get into doing more implants, so after finishing up a residency program, he eventually finds himself in his uncle's practice. Early into digital, he found himself having to explain to labs what was needed when he started designing custom abutments. Seeing the frustration and the lack of communication, he started doing his own designs and eventually turned it into a lab accepting work from other doctors. Now, Dr. Domingue knows the pains and struggles from both sides and has great insights into improving the workflow between the two. But one of the cool things is we talk about how he needed a better screw for his full arch cases, and with a bunch of engineers turned dental technicians, they developed the Vortex screw.
Sweet.
Yeah, so join us as we chat with Dr. Danny Domingue. Voices from the bench. The interview. We are super excited today to welcome to the podcast somebody that David Avery recommended we talk to. And when David Avery has a recommendation, it usually turns out to be a pretty good one. Dr. Danny Domingue, how are you, sir?
Good, man. In Cajun country, we say Domingue. But
Domingue, is that how you pronounce your last name?
Yeah, Domingue. Yeah, it's
Domingue.
Yeah, Southern French last name. I mean, if you're in my zip code, everybody's pronouncing my last name right. Once you exit our zip code, it's like nobody gets it right. So, all good. Yeah, but I'm a general dentist in a very small town of a Greater Lafayette. Is about 150,000 people.
Yeah.
I'm young. I'm about 44 years old. I've heard a lot about your podcast.
Uh-oh.
I've actually met you in Chicago last year.
Oh.
Saw you guys podcasting at your booth.
Very cool. I had no idea. Did my pronunciation, was that at least a popular mispronunciation?
Very popular.
Okay, good.
Yeah, so you're good.
Yeah, so David tells me that you not only a dentist, but you also own a lab. So kind of want to find out what the hell you're doing in our space. Just kidding.
Right. Like stay in your own lane, right?
Yeah, come on now. Let us do the work. But we'd like to hear about really how you end up becoming a dentist. What got you interested into it? Give me your whole kind of path to where you are now.
So, all right, that's a good question. Originally I was going to go to medical school. My grandfather, who was a physician, a general physician, I kind of idolized him and looked up to him.
Yeah.
Medicine's changing. Why don't you look into go into dentistry? And I really didn't know much about dentistry. So I went on a Mexico mission trip with the dental students from LSU School of Dentistry. They let me pull a tooth. And
they let you pull a tooth before any schooling?
I was in high school, yeah. And the exhilaration of pulling a tooth, I was like, man, I could really get into this. I really didn't even know what else dentists did, and implants weren't a thing back then. So, I went to go observe a couple dentists. One of them was my uncle, and I saw him do a filling one time. I was like, this can't be too hard. It looks okay. I never really considered dentistry a serious career, but when I got to college at LSU, I was like, all right, I'm putting all my weight into to being a dentist. And, graduated college in biological sciences, went to dental school, to LSU School of Dentistry, graduated. And then after graduation, we in New Orleans, remember Katrina? I was year, and I was actually studying for an implantology phono. And my medical school friend shows up at my house. He's like, dude, we got to evacuate now. The hurricane's about to hit. I was like, what are you talking about?
You were that so much into studying, you had no idea this hurricane was coming?
Yeah, I was studying for finals. So, you don't watch TV, you don't do anything. You just head down in the books. And I had school all week, so I wasn't paying attention to anything else.
Wow.
And he shows up, and I'm like, all right. So we get in our car. It took us an hour. We went 1 mile in an hour because there's so much traffic trying to get out of New Orleans. We couldn't get out. So I was like, look, I got to finish studying. So we turned back around. I went back to my house. I studied till 2 o'clock in the morning. He shows back up with his bags packed this time. We get on the interstate. By that time, the hurricane had hit, and we were driving outbound on the inbound highway. And whenever a wind gust would come, it would pull my car over into the next lane. But there wasn't a lot of cars on the road. And I remember trying to get around trees so that whenever it was an open highway where there's no trees, I remember my car, going everywhere. And I got home, and the next morning I woke up, and the city was flooding, and we couldn't go back to dental school, so we wound up going to move into Baton Rouge. The dental school moved out of New Orleans, moved to Baton Rouge, and we started taking classes at the vet school. And then FEMA built us a makeshift dental clinic in a really poor area. We started seeing patients there, and then that was my education. I never finished in New Orleans. I actually finished my last patient in Baton Rouge. But I didn't feel like I was ready to see a patient. I always wanted to do a general practice residency. So I applied a couple programs, got into 2 in New York, and I wound up going to Brookdale Hospital in Brooklyn, New York, did a 1-year general practice residency because they had a 2-year implantology fellowship and a 2-year anesthesia fellowship. So I graduated the GPR, did a 2-year implantology fellowship, and I wanted to go all in with implants because that at the time seemed to be the right path. And I'm really glad I made that decision. While I was
Why?
there,
Why was it just
I
growing
liked,
or?
I wanted to stay a general dentist because I felt like I liked the crown restorative work. I enjoyed that. But once I got really into implants, I really didn't want to do restorative work anymore.
Did you place any implants in school?
No, not after Katrina. Our education kind of changed a lot. We barely got out with what we had. So that's why I kind of wanted to do GPR. But the GPR I did was really surgical based. We're doing bone reduction fractures. We're going to the OR a lot to reduce zygomatic fractures.
Wow.
We're doing bone grafts from the hip, things like that. It was pretty surgical advanced. So
sure, there
was thoughts of me going to oral surgery school, and I got an invite from one of the guys, but I would lose the ability to restore cases, and that was the part that I didn't want to miss out on, or limit my practice. So I stayed the course. Did the 2-year implantology fellowship at Brookdale, and we got to go to NYU, and Dr. Dennis Tornow at the time was our program director. So I learned from him 2 days a week, went back to the program 3 days a week where I placed and restored our implants. And then and that was in 2010. I graduated from the residency program as a chief of the department. And then, I didn't know that. I didn't know what I didn't know. And, I didn't know how to run a business. I didn't know revenue stream or paying up my loan. So, I learned a lot whenever I got out of school just by working under other people. So I took an associate position for a year. And then after the year, we were very successful our first year out, and it kind of blew the numbers out of the water for this guy. And he was like, man, we did really well. I said, yeah, we did really well. And I'd like to have an opportunity to buy in. And he said, no, I don't want to sell my practice. I'm still pretty young. And I said, well, would you pay me an increase? And because I know you did pretty well. And he said, no, I don't want to do that either. I said, well, I'm probably not going to stay here.
Yeah.
And then,
wow. I
doubled his practice, and I didn't see a significant increase in my income. So I moved on and wound up moving back to my hometown in Lafayette. And so I worked for about 5.5 years before I moved back here, 3 years in New York and 2.5 years in a small town, Lake Charles, and then moved to Lafayette. And I've been here for, 12 years now. The practice I moved into is actually my uncle, the guy that I watched do a filling on. And
okay.
Primarily implant-based practice. And he's 70 in the next couple of months, so he's looking to retire at some point.
He's still working?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. And, so I was placing implants and taking impressions and sending it to the lab. And, when I graduated, you get back a tooth, you put it in the patient's mouth, right? And then I bought the first or second 3-shape scanner about 12 years ago in the state of Louisiana. And I started taking scans and sending it to labs. And then I was looking at the CAD designs for them, and I was thinking, man, this is the future. Like, this is the future. You don't have to take a PBS impression. I was so enamored by it was actually the 3-shape black and white scanner. I was so impressed by just the technology back then. Fast forward to today.
Are we talking like early trios?
Yes.
Yeah, it was black and white, the first one?
Black and white.
I had no idea.
Yes.
Why was it black and white? It's not that old.
Yeah, dude. The first one was black and white. And then they came out with an upgraded edition, the color. And that was like a big deal to have the color one.
Sure.
So I wound up upgrading the color. I don't remember. That was like Trios 1. I think I had Trios 1 and Trios 2.
Wow.
And kind of rocked and roll with that. And then I started sending it out to labs. But what I noticed in the lab world, and this is why I got into the lab world, because it's a really good question. So get a lot. Like, why don't you just stay in your space? What I realized was, like, when I was sending the cases to the labs, some of the labs I was using, I was educating the designers on what the crown abutment needed to look like and what I was looking for, right? Because everybody was so analog at the time, and they would just buy a prefabricated abutment, prep it down, and then make a crown on it, right? And that was great at the time. But this was like new tech to do a custom abutment and mill a pre-mill. And a buddy of mine, I was lecturing at the time and lecturing a good bit, and one of my friends told me, he's like, hey, what are you doing? You're showing all these cases, but he said, why aren't you milling your own cases? And I was like, well, I'm not a lab. He's like, well, why don't you be a lab? Because he's like, at the end of the day, Danny, you're showing actually what laboratories do for you. Of course you seed it in the patient's mouth, but that's not, if you're lecturing and showing these guys from A to Z how to do implants, I was like, man. So it kind of weighed on me a little bit. So I bought a mill just to see if I would get into it. Fast forward to today, we've been open for 7 years. We work with 350 dentists. We have 15 employees, and I have a whole new respect for the laboratories. That's what it's created for me. That it's created a respect for what your industry has to deal with on a regular basis. Like there's a disconnect. And Elvis, I want to be very clear about this because there's a frustration dentists have for laboratories, and there's a frustration that laboratories have for dentists. But the problem is there's so much miscommunication, and it's from both sides. It's not just the dentist and it's not just the laboratories, but like dentists don't give labs enough information. They don't. And the reason why they don't give us enough, because we don't fully understand your workflows. We just know our workflows. And so, the first year or so, I was realizing like the trials and tribulations that go into getting even milled shell provisionals, milling a custom abutment. It was like everything was setting into me. So at the onset, I did not want to form a lab, but I was designing my own custom abutments and crowns and milling them in my office.
You were just doing it for yourself at the beginning.
Yeah, just for myself. Yeah. And then after COVID hit, some people lost their jobs in around this area, and people came up to me asking me like, would you hire me? And I was like, well, I'm not really looking for anybody, and this is not really an industry that I'm looking to explore, but it would give me more time at home with my wife and my daughter if you would do this for me. So I would consider hiring you. And that's kind of how I got started off. And so once I started hiring those employees, I had to move it out of my office. And when I moved it out of my office, then I had to pay rent, and I had to get insurance, and I had to pay sales tax.
To make more money.
Then I got to open the doors up to getting other cases,
I want to go back to when you first started doing custom abutments and you had to educate other labs on how to do it. What were you having to teach them? Like emergence profile, soft tissue compression, that kind of thing?
Yeah, stuff like that. So now we work with 350 dentists, and everybody has their own there was a guy this morning. He wants all of his facial margins on his custom abutments 1.5 millimeters sub G.
1.5?
Yeah, that's pretty deep. To me, that's pretty deep.
Yeah, that is deep.
Yeah. But that's what he wants. And it's all RX, and you got to follow RX. So yeah, we'll make him 1.5 millimeters sub. But, what he didn't know, and we're trying to email this back and forth to him, is his implants placed as a crestal implant. And you only have like a millimeter of soft tissue. So we can't go 1.5 millimeters because we don't have that room. We're bottoming it out. I do feel like, out of respect for everyone, like dentist job is to educate patients on the options they have within the scope of the dentist practice to get restored with an implant.
Mm-hmm.
And then it's the laboratory's job to educate dentists on what options they have after the implant's placed to be able to restore that properly. Because, we had a case yesterday where the dentist was like, hey, I need a screw retain crown on a tie base. And if you look at the models, the bite is so tight on this patient that the tie base, the OEM tie base from Buyer Horizons, just the tie base alone occludes with the maxillary.
Yeah.
And trying to explain that over email, the dentist don't even know that.
Just cut the tie base down. What do you?
Yeah. So that was kind of like our solution. But the deal with that is, now you don't have as much ferrule, right?
Technically, I don't think we're supposed to cut down the tie bases.
You're not.
Yeah, I mean, you're messing with the FDA approved.
Bingo.
Yeah.
And then if you did that, then you mess with the anti-rotational forces of that tie base, right?
Yeah, depending on where those are, yeah.
Correct. And in BioHorizon specifically, they have a lip at the top of the tie base that creates the anti-rotational. But still with those, you get I'm sure you're aware of fretting. There's a zirconia wear to the titanium. And so you'll still have some of those crowns loosened because of the fretting.
Yeah. So what was the solution? You talk them into a custom abutment?
That's kind of where we're at now.
Yeah.
But that's kind of like trying to go full circle. That's, to my point, is dentists educate patients. Laboratories have been educating dentists their options to be able to restore this tooth properly. So in our lab, there's nobody that's experienced that has design and exocad out there in the market, right? You can't hire first of all, lab tech. There's a lab tech school in New Orleans, and they hire six.
Yeah.
They graduate like 6 a year. They all have jobs by their first semester.
Oh, I'm sure.
And, so I can't hire those guys. And so what I did in Louisiana, and specifically in my town, there's a college that's a really good mechanical engineering or engineering program, and I hire mechanical engineers. And I bring those MEs in here, and I teach them. They know design, they know CAD. They just don't know tooth numbering and tooth shape and size. So I basically say, like, guys, look, numbering is easy. And this is how you do the, buccal cusp, lingual cusp, this is about this occlusion. Once they get that down, there's really not much else to teach them because they're trained in CAD, so they know design. I just teach them the parameters where they work in. Those guys blow it out the water. They're unbelievable. Super impressive on how their thought process works. And then they get to study like strength of, the strength of zirconia material. How thick does it be?
Oh, I'm sure they nerd out on that real hard.
That's like secondhand knowledge. Like they're already aware and understand that. That's not trouble for them. That's not. So then we get to do cooler things. And so everything that we output from our lab, look, this is going out to a bunch of laboratory technicians. So if you're looking for, designers, I've found mechanical engineers are my favorite.
Yeah.
To work with. They're just bright guys. And then with that, this was about 4 or 5 years ago. We had a smaller team back then, and I was placing and restoring full arches, and we're milling our own arches, and I was using some screws and trying to figure out what was going to be the best screw on the market at the time. And I didn't, Rosen screws seemed to be a really good screw.
Yeah, pretty popular.
Back then, it was like pretty new. Powerball had just come out on the scene, but it was such a wide, tall screw. It didn't make any sense. So over a couple, afternoons after work, we brought all the screws into CAD, and we started studying all the screws, the pitch of the screw, the depth of the screw in the MUA, number of turns inside a multi-unit abutment.
That's some nerdy engineer.
Yeah.
After hour hanging out.
I would just explain screw design and the reason for changing up a screw. And once they heard that, so they were teaching me about preloading clamping forces, and I was telling them about the screws on the market. And once they studied them, they're like, well, it's pretty easy. And I was like, well, what does that look like? And so I was drawing on a napkin, and they would just put it in the CAD because they knew CAD better. And we developed the Vortex screws. We came up with like 4 different...
Wait. You developed the Vortex screw?
Yeah.
How did I miss this in part of my in-depth research on who I'm talking to?
Yeah. So this was about 4 years ago. So we had about 4 different types machined. And then once we had those, we started milling the different ones. And then we were looking at, hyperdent, how to mill, and final bull-end burrs, and what burrs would you would need, and the easiest templates. After we designed the screw, then we developed our exocad library that we kept for ourselves.
Sure.
Tested out all the screws, figured out which would be the best screw. And then actually all those 4 didn't qualify. So we made a couple changes and then made our final rev, which was like Rev 6 or 7. It was Rev 7 of our final screw. And then that's the one, lucky number 7 too, right? I'm just realizing that. And that became the Vortex screw. So I just started using it for my own cases and developed some success with it, sent it off for a patent before I actually launched it. And then when I launched it, I thought, I don't know how much, steam this would pick up, but I felt like out of all the screws in the market, we answered all the questions that I was having difficulties with. And that was the whole issue, like it was through multiple surfaces. You could mill it through a titanium bar at an angulated screw channel, which no screw at the time could, and still nobody does. You could mill it through direct to multi-unit abutment, and you had a tie base option. And then there was the levels of prosthetics heights from 1.4 to 0.4 within, just depending on the thickness of zirconia and what medium you were manufacturing in. And so, we released it. And once I did, I started realizing I needed a 510K. And so we 510Ks are about $250,000. So we bought a 510K. And that was before I even sold a screw. We had $50,000 for a patent, $250,000 for a 510K. And my wife, I remember going home, my wife was saying, hey, I really like this purse. I think I'm going to buy it. I said, hey, why don't you hold off on buying it a month or two? And I didn't really tell her at the time that I'd invested that much into the screw. And I didn't even know if it was going to do well or not. And I sat like that for about a year, not really sweating out. I felt like it was a superior product amongst all the other players. And then, fast forward to today, I mean, it's incredible. You know, I was in Atlanta recently at a show, and there's this famous periodontist I met, and I knew of him. I've never met him before. And, you know, he shook my hand and he said, "My name's Danny Domingue." I said, "Hey," he's like, "Hey, nice to meet you." And one of his friends said, "Hey, that's the guy that invented the Vortex." And he turned around and looked at me. He's like, "Dude, you invented the Vortex?" I was like, "This is my claim to fame, the Vortex screw." It's taken off in the lab. You know, I literally thought I would only be selling this screw to dentists, right? Dentists that are trying to mill their arches. I never thought it would catch fire with laboratories. Now the bulk of our ordering is to laboratories. It's amazing.
Oh, sure.
You know, like Midwest Dental Arts, Justin McElroy picked it up pretty early on. JB Dental Lab, Barksdale Dental Lab, Rowe Dental Lab, they're all really early adapters of the screw. And if a customer doesn't request a screw, they use our screw for all of those particular labs do. But then now what's happening is all those labs are getting requests for the Vortex screws. And it's kind of like, you know, it's taken off. So we have all these labs that have reached out to us.
So explain to the people that might not really get what makes a screw so different. What sets it apart from those other ones like the Powerball? And
I did a 45-minute webinar. I can include it in the show notes if you want to give it to give it out. Yeah. And recently in Atlanta, when I was at that meeting, they requested I give a lecture to laboratories on the benefits of Vortex screw. And I was like, okay, I said yes to it. And I thought it was going to be an hour lecture. And when I got to Atlanta, I read the sheet, and it was a 3.5-hour lecture. And I thought, oh my God.
Oh, jeez.
And but fortunately, you know, I had plenty of material, and we wound up talking all 3.5 hours, and I wound up staying later to answer some questions. And it was just a laboratory text, some dentists that were, you know, buying mills and milling in house, and some assistants that were helping out their doctors that do full arch, and they stay in that game. But you know, essentially a mechanical standpoint, you know, what we learned 4 years ago on how zirconia gets milled out and hard angles versus hyperbolic channels, you know, where's the stress and strain on an arch, and then also looking at the screw axis holes on how conventional milling bores out a large hole, and how do we tighten the hole to get really tight holes. So we, you know, screw axis holes are not large, they're small, and you don't have to worry so much about larger holes in arches versus what's normal today. So we wound up getting Jordan Greenberg with Hyperdent to fly down to Louisiana, and we had a Rev one of a template. So template generator is a software that we bought from Hyperdent. It's like 10 grand. But what we tried to create is the best tolerance for milling. So whenever you pull your arch into Hyperdent, the geos that are tagged to the Vortex screw would be auto-calculated. So the Hyperdent calculations for your arch would be very short and already set, so that whenever you mill those screw channels out, you would never have a failure. Right. This was 3 years ago or 4 years ago, and we never wanted to undermill and we never wanted to overmill our screw axis channel, because that's where all the IT is, and the IP, and that was really important to us. So we spent a week working with him. We milled, you know, hundreds and hundreds of cases and measured them all. You know, so we'd measure a PMA puck, we'd measure a zirconia puck, synthrit, and single tooth, and we'd measure angles, straight, direct, 10, 15, 20, 25 degrees, to try to figure out where would be the hiccup for laboratories or dentists, and got it down to really a science, man. So we finished off with Rev 3, which is out now. So if any laboratory, you know, is listening to this and they're looking at milling the Vortex screw channel, you need to have the template for Hyperdent if you're using Hyperdent to be able. If you put that template in, it's a free template, we give it out. But if you put that into your Hyperdent, it'll auto calculate the toolpath, so you don't have to worry about it. And precision and accuracy it was really important to us.
So if a lab wants to do the Vortex screw, it's not just the exocad DMEs. You got to have the CAM side of it too.
Yeah, so exocad actually has the SPFAs, and 3Shape has the DMEs.
Oh, okay.
And we've written those for those softwares, like my lab has. So typically what a company does is they'll outsource they'll hire a company to come in house, you know, like Implant Direct or something like that. They'll say, hey, look, we need a library. We'll hire this third party company. They'll create all their libraries for them. They'll pay them an obnoxious amount of money. And I kind of felt like, if I really wanted to understand the screw enough, we should do that in-house. So all of our MEs met and we had some coffee over on a Saturday. We started drawing our exocad and our 3-shape libraries. 3-shape's a little bit harder to deal with because they come out with all these releases.
Yeah.
But exocad came out, released pretty easily. And we created a library, and we get asked all the time to update the library with this multi-unit abutment and this size screw. So, and hopefully by the end of the year, January 2nd, we're going to release our master exocad library for a massive update. And it's going to incorporate all these, like Straumann SRA MUA is a different interface.
Yep.
So we created a specific MUA seat for that. And we're going to we've been releasing it to people that have been requesting it. So we have 3 different screws, actually. It's the 1.4, which is the most common. It's the Noble BioCarc compatible. That's, 80% of what people purchase. Then 15% of what people purchase are probably the Ritter compatible, which is the 1.6 millimeter screw. The radius is only 0.1 millimeters wider. And some people claim it's a stronger screw just because of that. That's debatable. And then there's the 1.8 millimeter screw, which is equivalent to a 172. Now, I didn't say 1.72. There's a misnomer in there. It's a 172. So that's actually an engineer term for the number of turns. And
172 turns?
It's actually equivalent to 1.81 when you work out the math. It's 0.05 millimeters in radius wider than the 1.8. Millimeter screw.
And what's that compatible with?
It's implant direct compatible.
Oh, okay.
Is the most commonly requested profile for that, and we're about to release a library for them as well. But yeah, that kind of took off, and the T5 driver was a really good idea for us to work through because it's like the universal driver for all angle screw channels. So that's our driver. Basically, people have been asking for it. Like they'll reach out and say, hey, do you have this? Do you have this? Do you have this? And since we have MEs, we just say, all right, no, we don't, but we'll create it and we'll send it to you. And then recently we just released a bone ref screw, it's called the AIM screw. AIM, it stands for Atlantic Implant Marker, which is like a fiducial marker. That's more aligned for dentists, but it does help us realign bites. So what dentists are using a lot now are these fiducial markers. So what they'll do is they'll have a preoperative scan they'll send to the lab, and then they'll add a fiducial marker, maybe at the midline or in the palate, and then they'll add that to their initial scan, and then they'll dentulate the patient, place implants, and then do their iMetric or RefCam scabs or shining scans or whatever. But use that fiducial marker again to stitch back. The issue is in those single fiduciaries, you lose your horizontal rotation sometimes.
Is it like just because it's like a circle and
correct?
There's no plane. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. And so they started moving to triangulations. So dentists started moving to triangulations, which if you understand intraoral scanning, sometimes triangulations in cross stitching for an arch, you'll have some issues with the scan data, the intraoral scan data stitching properly. So this fiducial marker has definitely helped with the vertical displacement of stitching scans together. But to index, we would need to allow for rotational accuracy, right? So we came up with this AIM screw. And like I said, most labs won't be ordering it. Most dentists can be ordering. And actually, I take it back, man. A lab reached out today to order some because they do a lot of conversions for dentists. I take it back. We had our first
and they
lab.
Provided the AIM screw.
So what they're doing is they're buying them, and then when they go to the surgery, they'll say like, hey, you use this fiducial marker so we can stitch our scans, and that'll help us be able to reference back to our initial scan. Yeah. So
I've done a few surgeries where it's just like a screw in the palate, and I think the doctor referred to it as like a breadcrumb. Is that basically the same thing?
Yeah, call it what you want. Yeah. Yeah. It's like a screw on the palate, basically. So there's different types, man. So what's unique about it, it's a new product. So there's not a lot of information out there. I'm not trying to plug it, but the bone screw that we have has a multi-unit abutment interface. So you can put a multi-unit abutment scan body on it. All right.
Oh, interesting. Yeah.
But also, when you take your verification scans, like photogrammetry scans, you're actually taking a photogrammetry reference marker of that palatal fiducial marker. Do you follow me? So when you stitch, it auto aligns with the implants in their position with that palatal reference. So there's never, ever, ever any issues with bite adjustments. They're 100% right all the time, because you have your intraoral scan, but then also you have your photogrammetry scan that verify each other, and then when you cross mount, it's already stitched back. So pretty neat concept for a fiducial scan, and it's under patent right now.
So you would use this just like you would a multi-unit. So
Sure,
when
yeah,
you're
exactly.
you're putting a scan body on it.
Yeah.
If you're doing omni-splint, you're using an omni-splint abutment on it. If you're doing photogrammetry, you're putting one of those domino-looking things in it.
Bingo.
Wow, interesting.
Yeah, so that's really helped us out recently, and I posted a couple cases about this. I'll send you some images if you'd like to see it
please.
in real life. Just some surgical photos, and just to show you how it's stitched. I might even put a video together just to kind of show you how it works out. But for laboratories, and look, I'm speaking from experience because I have a laboratory. And I'm a dentist, and I have a lab. And the nice thing about it is the lab is, a 3-minute walk from office. I just walk outside, walk across the street, and I'm there.
Nice.
And I get to go play with these guys, because the laboratory, it really is a fun job. It's a fun job. There's a lot of cool stuff that you can do in that world. It just, you lose the fun whenever a doctor calls and he's like, "Where's my case?" And you realize, like, oh gosh, we never got the scans, who dropped the ball. That's whenever it kind of loses its fun and its flair, is a little bit of the stress that goes into it. But it is cool what what laboratories are able to do nowadays, to be able to manufacture custom abutments and zirconia crowns and sintering times and the shades, and what's coming out with zirconia is just really impressive, right?
Oh, absolutely. I imagine you're restoring most of yours with zirconia, the full arches.
Yeah, I'm restoring my own cases, and I'm restoring some for doctors. And here's the other thing: like, I was working with a lab, and they were really good, but I would mill. They would mill the provisionals for me, and I put them in the patient's mouth. Yeah, I'd refer them back to the dentist and say, "Well, this dentist, I'm just the implant guy. Your real dentist is going to do the restorative." Mm-hmm. And if it's a single tooth crown, the dentist would call the lab and say, "Hey, send me that single tooth crown." And they would send him the crown, and he'd stick it in the patient's mouth and charge him for a crown. It's really big win for the restorative dentist, because they really didn't have to do anything. They have to take an impression. They have to do anything. That was what digital provided. But, now it's for full arch. When I would hand that patient off, the dentist would be like, "Hey, send me that full arch." The full arch would show up, and, it's a $5,000 full arch. And they got all these screws and these parts and with driver. And so the dentist that doesn't do a lot of these cases, restorative a lot of cases, it's a big learn curve for them. They don't know what they're doing, and they have this big lab bill, and they get stressed out about it. So it wasn't a good handoff, right? And if I wasn't doing it fully digital, it wasn't a handoff at all, because then they have to get the patient in, take impressions, mount the models. It was hard. But now that we have digital dentistry, and I'm literally working with the lab, our lab, and so the referral doctors say, call my lab up, they come over and we'll teach them what they need to do, and then they just deliver the case. Just so much more profitable and so much more predictable. To me, it's predictability. And it's like, a patient spends all this money, all this time. They've already suffered enough not having teeth or having terrible teeth. And they're finally getting to this point where they're about to get their finals in. Everything should go really smooth for everyone, for the patient, dentist, and the lab, right? There should never be a miscommunication, all that. But oftentimes, sometimes there is, and so, like, I'm trying to break that barrier down for myself and for other dentists to try to help ease the workflow in the space. And I don't think, I'm going to be the next, Glidewell lab. And that's not an aspiration for me. My aspiration is my true aspiration was to come back to Lafayette, Louisiana, and take care of the people that raised me. My aunts and uncles. My dad's one of 12. He's got 12 brothers and sisters. His father passed away whenever he was 5 years old, when my grandmother was pregnant for their 12th baby, and he had to raise himself, or his brothers raised him. And so when I was growing up, all my aunts and uncles were kind of like my father figures, my mother figures. And it's a small community, so we have a lot of my family around here. I have 50-something cousins. And I was like, I'm going to move to New York, get a scheduled education. I married really well. And, she was from Denver, and there was an option to go to Denver. There was an option to go to Louisiana. I don't know why, but we fell into this Louisiana spot, and I started working here. And I really just wanted to come home to take care of these people. And because it is a good culture. It's a good place to raise a family. It's you got
to look out for hurricanes.
Right. Yeah. for sure. That was the whole thing to move back home. And so I like that, and those are like qualities. I wanted to take care of patients through the laboratory, But now it's kind of come to that point, Elvis, where it's like, it's a lot of work and there's rush cases, there's things. And it's like, man, so we just hired a manager. We just hired an accountant to take over those operations. So I can my job really in the lab now is to create cool things. So look forward to some new stuff coming out of the pipeline. If anybody's interested, it's LADentalImplantLab.com. You can go on our prosthetic options or the Vortex screw, or reach out to me. I'll put my email in the show notes if you want to direct message me and ask me any questions. And I do get hit up pretty frequently, at least once a day, with questions about the Vortex screw or what have you.
Do most of the doctors you work with, do they send you the patients to place the implants, or are they placing the implants?
So when I first moved here 12 years ago, I was getting a lot of referrals from general dentists to place their implants, put a custom abutment in the mouth, and refer the patient back. Fast forward to today, 12 years later, there's a whole new generation of people graduating from dental school.
Yep.
Those guys are placing single tooth implants.
Sure.
Bicuspids, molars, they're placing. If they get into a location where it's like, this person needs a sinus lift, or if it's the bone's real thin, or if it's a real high aesthetic area, or if it's a high demanding patient, or if it's a full mouth rehab where the patient needs immediate loaded provisionals, or if the patient's got a significant medical history and it's really, really difficult, then they refer to me, which is great because it's really improved my skill to place and restore implants. And it's made me think outside the box. So I started resulting into things of designing my own surgical guides. And now Corey Glenn, I don't know if you guys know who that is, but he lectures a good bit on surgical guide design. And him and I teach a good bit. If you go to CoreyGlenn.com, that's his website. And him and I lecture to a lot of labs that are trying to design guides for their doctors that they work with for full arch. We do teach dentists for sure. But if any lab's interested, that would be a really good course to go to learn.
What's different about the guides?
So surgical guide design, just, you could do a pilot drill guide, or you could do a full guide, fully guided, where you drill your osteotomy through the surgical guide, or the dentist would, and then dentists place the implants through the surgical guide to get really accurate placement. Since I'm a dental lab, a lot of dentists will call me and say, hey, will you design this surgical guide for me? But we don't design surgical guides for dentists. I don't want to be in that game. So I'm happy to refer that to anybody that's listening to this podcast. Just reach out to me. I like to restore implants mostly. And, there's guys that just have a bad day and put an implant in an unusual position, or don't have minimal bone and not a lot of prosthetic space. What I like is troubleshooting really difficult, hard cases to help dentists get a really good restorative option when their options are limited. That's been kind of fun for me. And then kind of create a little bit more with the Vortex screw. Like we just came out with, like I said, those fiducial markers and some bone screws and things like that. So,
What do you teach with guides? I mean, do you use a certain software? I mean, what makes
it? So we use, good question. So we use Blue Sky Bio software, which is a free software, a free download. And we teach people how to plan an implant and make a surgical guide, 3D print it, and then show the surgery.
Interesting.
And we show it for single tooth, a couple teeth, and then a full arch. If it's an FP1, how do you do ovate ponic designs in the surgical guide? If it's an FP3, how do you design a surgical guide to do bone reduction? How do you print it? What are your parameters? How thick is going to be the material? What type of material? Do you mill it? Could you mill it? Could you 3D print it? What material, what labs do you outsource to get that at a very fair price? Tips, tools, tricks, all those types of things. It's a 2-day. It's usually like 9 hours both days.
Wow.
Friday, Saturday. But literally after the first day, you feel lost. The second day, by the end of the day, you really should be able to design at least one guide, right? And the cost of the course is not that much. Even if you did one surgical guide for one of your docs, the course would pay for itself. We usually teach fully guided capabilities because that's the most requested by laboratories, and that's most requested by dentists. But I only do my own cases for fully guided. I learned everything from Corey Glenn, and him and I have teamed up. He's probably like the smartest guy I've ever met before in my life. But him and I have teamed up, and we give these lectures to dentists, and it's been great, man. We've been doing that for like 5 years now.
It's incredible you're doing all this with the free software.
Yeah, it really is. And it's a $15 export. So, and laboratories are like, well, what do you charge? It's like, I don't know. Whatever your time's worth. I mean, some people charge $5,000 for these surgical guides, and then they mill up the finals for, $2,000 on top of that.
Yeah. I've seen it all over the board.
Yeah, and there's a guy that I know he outsources everything and pays these guys overseas, next to nothing.
Mm-hmm.
And he charges like $500 for a surgical guide. But that's if you 3D print on your own. So he just does the design work in 3D, and you just sends you the file. The dentist would 3D print it, or the lab would 3D print it. And, you upcharge from there if you want to, because you're going to have to support that product. All that to say, that I've had hiccups in practice where I've gone to deliver a case and it doesn't deliver right. And it's frustrating as a dentist not to understand why the lab just couldn't do it off the scans. Like, why couldn't you just take this and make it, and I could just put it in the patient's mouth and I wouldn't be so frustrated? Well, now I understand like where the hiccup is in all this, right?
Yeah.
And I have a true appreciation for the workflow you guys deal with and the people that you guys deal with. And there are a lot of dentists that we work with that are very appreciative. One guy, we dropped the ball on him. We didn't QC an arch properly, and he figured out the problem, was so generous to ship us back the arch. We were able to fix it and ship it back to him the next day. And he was like, "Yeah, guys, it's a learning experience. Don't worry about it." Like, man, I love working with dentists like that. Yeah.
I'll take them all day long.
Exactly.
So in your experience being both the lab and the clinician, what do you think's one of the biggest takeaways that a lab could get from you to better communicate to an office?
That is a really, really good question. And
it's kind of loaded too, I know. So.
Yeah, I mean, because here's the miscommunication is the lab doesn't know what the dentist doesn't know, and the dentist doesn't know what the laboratory doesn't know, right?
That's a great point.
And so, like, if I send scans and the bite doesn't stitch properly and the lab gets them, the lab can tell the bite is not right a lot of times. And so they can, without even talking to the guy, they can just like remount the bite real quick and fix it for them. So they don't have to deal with that. And there is an underappreciation for things like that, where the dentist didn't even recognize the issue because maybe he didn't scan the bite. Maybe he walked out of the room and maybe his dental assistant scanned the bite and the patient just moved their jaw, and then the software, which is what it's supposed to do, stitch it where it was scanned. And it's a little problem that can happen like that if it's not seen by the laboratory and it actually goes to manufacturing, it gets back to the patient, they could be really frustrating for both the patient and the dentist, right? Because the dentist feels the heat from the workflow that they're currently in. Like, I was supposed to go in there and torque the abutment out. It was supposed to take me 15, 20 minutes. But the patient wanted to talk, and I was running behind, and then I put it in, and she was in pain. She wasn't feeling right because it wasn't right. There's all these like influences that modify the person that we are. Because truly, dentists are good people.
Sure.
Dentists don't go into. I'm really convinced. I'll take it back that maybe some do, but when I was in school, like I wanted to go to dental school to help people, right? You don't go to dental school to make money, but I wanted to go to dental school to be my own boss. One. And number two is to help other people, right?
Yeah.
I wanted to have a successful career and I wanted to provide for a family. And, I grew up in one of four boys. My dad lost his job a couple times. I almost lost my house growing up and kind of had hard knocks life as a child. My mom and dad both had to work growing up. And my dad just recently told me whenever I was growing up, he made $36,000 a year. That was his annual income. So he had to take a second job to be able to, and so we didn't have.
When he was a dentist? Wait, your dad wasn't a dentist.
My dad was not a dentist, but he was severely underpaid sales rep for the oil and gas field. And so my mom was a nurse. She wasn't making but $45,000 a year. And so the combined income household, we were making less than $80,000 a year back in the day. And how do you raise four boys, on $80,000 a year? Pay a house note, buy groceries. Because, my brothers and I would drink a gallon of milk a day. That was what my mom said. And whenever she would cook spaghetti, she would cook 5 pounds of ground meat to feed four boys and a husband and herself to have leftovers for the next day. But typically we'd eat it all.
5 pounds.
So all that to say, I grew up if we went to a baseball game, I never asked my mom for a Coke. Like Cokes were a quarter and I knew things were tight.
Yeah.
So that's part of the reason why I wanted to go to dental school, because I wanted to be my own boss and I wanted to have some financial dependence. My goal was to make 6 figures when I got, I was like, man, I need to make $100,000 when I got out. And that was like my goal, and thankfully that's easily attained nowadays.
Oh, sure.
And look, I'm very fortunate. My wife my wife was living in a garage as a child in her grandmother's garage because they lost their house as a kid. So her and I have very similar backgrounds at a young age. So we do appreciate everything we have and try to instill that in our daughter. And, her and I are just, kind of hardworking type people, just kind of saw a need for the Vortex screw. And, I told myself I would never retire on the Vortex screw, but at least I gave dentistry something back, because dentistry's done so much for me and my family. Right?
Sure.
And that was kind of my initial thought process whenever I initially released it to the public. And it's, every time somebody reaches out and they say, well, they want to incorporate the Vortex screw, and, the new Shining Elite scanner, they just incorporated the Vortex screw. It's the first and only non-OEM screw that's incorporated. They haven't incorporated.
Oh, wow. Really?
Yeah. Lena, who's the national sales director, and Isaac Tayawal, who's the director from the dentist perspective of the program, both reached out to me about 2 weeks ago and told me about this.
Did they have to get permission?
Yeah, they reached out because they needed some geos. So basically, the screw seat path is very precise, and that's considered intellectual property, and you can't recreate that, or it'd be very difficult to recreate that. I guess you could. A smart guy could probably do some workaround to try to figure out those geos, but you wouldn't want to make any issues. So they reached out. I was happy to send them anything just to help their software out, and I think it's going to release pretty soon.
You had to have turned down offers for the Vortex screw from some major implant companies, right?
You would think. And early on, I actually reached out to an implant company and I said, look, I really have a really good screw. I would love it if you guys would take this screw to the next level, because I'm a practicing dentist. I'm not a distribution company. And I got dead silence over the phone.
Sure.
And, we won't call you back. That was before, and I was good friends with all those guys. I was buying all their implants, and I was like, okay. And then I think I reached out to one other person to talk about the, if they wanted to distribute and sell and actually manufacture. I was going to sign over the rights of the patent to them, and they gave me a cold shoulder. And I guess it's kind of one of those cool stories where you hear, that artist that got rejected, or the person that's writing a book got rejected 15 times.
Yep.
All of a sudden they hit a Nobel Prize, or they hit a New York Times bestseller respectively. And it's kind of neat looking back at what's been done. It's cool because this week we shipped screws to Thailand, New Zealand, Australia, Poland, Italy, Spain, United Kingdom, and one international. So we do have international rights to be able to ship these now.
That is so cool.
Yeah, it's crazy.
Did you have any idea when you started this Vortex screw for yourself that it would be this big?
Not like this. Yeah, not like this. Yeah. I do encourage any lab that's, kind of on the fence, and they're, if they would just look at the properties this screw offers compared to what conventional screws do. There's no comparison to screw loosening of arches should not be a thing, right?
Yeah.
No lab should get a call from a dentist and say, my screws are breaking. No lab should have to deal with those phone calls. No lab
unless they're torquing them too hard.
Yeah, unless it's operator error for sure.
Yeah,
but no lab should have to deal with phone calls of screw loosening, screw fracture, zirconia fracture, improperly milled or improperly printed screw channels due to inaccuracies, or any of those kind of things. All those should be like a way of the past. Like, that's old. If you're still dealing with that, then reach out. I'll set you on a path for success 100% of the time. But that's old problems, and I don't deal with those problems. We need predictability in the laboratory. So when if you're going to mill it, it's got to be milled one time only. There's so much time that goes into calculating and milling and centering. To have to do that is such a time waste and a profit loss.
Makes sense that you have to think about it that much.
Exactly.
It shouldn't. It's all science. I mean, it's all numbers and.
Yes. And that should be like less than 1% of your practice of having to deal with those types of issues, less than 1%. Because those are like eyeball missed numbers, like something went wrong, right?
Mm-hmm.
And if you are, then if it's greater than 1%, and 1% is high, then reevaluate what you're doing, because, you know, most of the population is not having those issues, or should not be having those issues.
What is your go-to final? Is it all zirconia straight to multi-unit, or do you do the zirconia over a titanium bar? Or
It's 50-50. So I like titanium bar substructures in FP3 and FP1. Sometimes in FP3, when the arch is so big, you know, I had a lady that had resorbed maxilla. All we could do was place zygos. So I placed zygos, teres, and a midline implant, and we did an FP3. The FP3 could only fit in a 35 millimeter zirconia puck, but I'm not going to put that in her mouth because it weighs so much. So a milled titanium substructure, which decreased the weight, and then you don't have to buy such a fat zirconia puck, so the pucks are cheaper. And then I milled a superstructure of zirconia on that. And then all I had to do was anodize the titanium pink to match her tissues. And then we did an FP3 upper and cemented them together. I mean, that thing is strong. It is not going to fracture.
35 millimeters, you're saying? The whole
arch was like 35 millimeters, right?
Wow.
I milled like, you know, let's say 15 millimeters in titanium, and I milled 20 millimeters in zirconia. Cemented them together, and now you have a really good, you know, think of it like a custom abutment on a zirconia crown but this is for a full arch.
Sure. Right.
And so I do a good bit of those, a lot of monolithic zirconia. We just recently switched to a 4Y mono zirconia that I think Zubler 345 is.
Okay, yeah.
Which is, the properties of it look, I mean, it's got great translucency, and we do a lot of Mio stain. And
okay, yeah.
I mean, they look amazing. They look amazing.
Are you milling your own titanium bars?
Yeah, we have Aram mills, and we're milling our own titanium bars. Yeah. So we like to design them. So what we'll do is we'll 3D print the provisionals or mill the provisionals for the dentist. They try them in. If they say, hey, look, it's great. You know, because some arches don't fit. You know, like I had this African-American male who came in, his mouth was so wide, I could not get his arch in any puck. So I milled a titanium bar substructure, put the second molars inside the bar, and then I just milled his first molar to first molar, 3 to 15, milled those in zirconia, cemented it, gold anodized the second molars, and he loves it.
I bet.
I've done that before.
You do love the creative cases.
Yeah, I really do. I really do enjoy that, and I get a little bit more appreciation for what we're doing inside in the practice as far as that's concerned.
That's really neat. What's next for the Vortex? Are you going to continue distribution yourself, or are you looking to?
So currently, you know, you can only get them through me, but we do have this thing with one reseller out of Houston, Vauxhall. They have a lot of boots on the ground sales reps, and they've been kind of going around and they do a lot of chairside stuff. Midwest Dental Arts has been proliferate about using it for all their cases. JB Dental Lab as well. Barksdale now. And at Roe Dental Lab, you can actually buy them through Roe's website because they didn't want to redirect their sales to my website, which I completely understand. And those guys, sure. JB, I'm actually going to be at Cole Lab in Chicago. I'm giving a lecture at Cole Lab. I'll be there is it February in Chicago?
Oh, for Lab Day?
Yeah.
Yeah, nice.
Isn't there a thing called Cole Lab? Is that what it is?
Oh, Cal Lab.
Cal Lab. Yeah.
Now it's making sense.
It's like a dentist, or no, if you own a lab, you get invited to this lab. You can have a membership or something like that. I don't know, I've never been, but recently BJ Komowitz reached out to me and asked me if I'd give a panel lecture on the main podium with him. And I said, yeah, that'd be fine. I'm really not sure what it's all about.
Yeah, no. I'll be there. Barb's on the board. I love Cal Lab. It's going to be awesome that you're going to be in a panel on that.
Cool, man. I look forward to it, yeah.
What is the panel about? Do you know? I mean, is it just...
I don't know. Yeah, I don't know.
You'll find out when you get there.
I have no idea, but I look forward to it, whatever it is.
Yeah, that's great. Dr. Danny, I already forgot how you pronounce your name the right way. Domingue?
Yeah, Domingue.
Domingue, Dr. Domingue. Thank you so much. That's some really cool stuff, man. I had no idea who you were, and that's why I love talking to people.
Congrats on your podcast, man. You've got a great name for yourself. I want to say very special prayer every night for every laboratory owner and employee out there.
Yeah.
You guys really do so much for our industry, and I think a lot of it goes underappreciated. So thank you for all you do. As a dentist, thank you. I think together with dentists and labs working together, not labs working for dentists, but us working together, I think we can improve the predictability and the success of prosthetics for the patient population. I think we need to, we need a little bit of not come to Jesus, but a little bit of work more towards helping each other.
I get
out.
it. Yeah, I think that should be the topic at CalLab if those people are listening. I mean, I 100% agree. It's just, It's got to be a partnership. We're all working for the same goal. And what I tell dentists all the time is I don't want to remake it any more than you do.
Yeah.
We're not doing any of this on purpose. So
yeah,
it's all for the greater outcome of whatever we're doing. So
thank you, Elvis.
Doctor, thank you so much, man. I appreciate it. And we'll be in touch soon, and we'll see you in Chicago.
Thank you so much. All right, buddy.
Thank you. Have a good one.
A huge thanks to Dr. Danny Domingue for coming on our podcast and giving us your perspective as a dentist, which is crazy, a dentist that owns a lab. I really am sorry that I missed the conversation as I always enjoy talking to dentists that understand the pain that us lab techs have to deal with. I don't know much, and Elvis knows this pretty well, about full arch screws, but the Vortex screw does sound like it fixes a lot of the problems those cases have. Everybody be sure to check out the link on this episode's show notes to see more about the Vortex screw and how it's different from others on the market. Thank you, Dr. Domingue, and we will see you at CalLab in Chicago.
Awesome, everybody. I'm going to let Barb go grab a bunch of coffee. We will talk to you next week.
Have a great week. Merry Christmas.
Bye.
Wear your bells. I haven't even had coffee yet.
Oh, geez. This is going to be fun then. The views and opinions expressed on the Voices from the Bench podcast are those of the guest and do not necessarily reflect the official policy or position of the host or Voices from the Bench, LLC.